The C-130 Hercules bucked like an angry bull as it carved through the storm clouds over the Mediterranean. Lightning split the darkness outside the small porthole windows, casting eerie shadows across the cargo bay where 12 of the Navy's most elite operators sat in tactical silence. The air reeked of jet fuel, sweat, and a metallic tang of fear that even the most seasoned warriors couldn't completely suppress before a high-stakes MISSIO, and Dr. Elena Vasquez moved through the cramped space with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to working in confined, hostile environments. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her olive-green flight suit bore no insignia except for a small medical course patch on her shoulder. To the SEALs, she was just another mission specialist, a necessary evil who would provide technical support for their infiltration of a suspected weapons facility on the Syrian coast. "Gentlemen," she called out over the drone of the engines, her voice carrying a slight accent that could have been Spanish or Italian. "We'll be approaching the drop zone in 20 minutes. These will help protect your hearing during the insertion." She held up a small metal case filled with what appeared to be standard military-issue earplugs. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Chun watched her approach from his position near the starboard bulkhead. At 28, Chun had already completed more classified operations than most soldiers saw in entire careers. His dark eyes, inherited from his Korean mother, missed nothing, a trait that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan and countless Black Ops missions that officially never happened. Elena moved methodically down the line of operators, handing each man a pair of the flesh-colored plugs. "Insert them fully," she instructed, demonstrating with her own ear. "The frequency dampening is calibrated specifically for the sonic disruptors we'll be using to breach the facility's electronic locks." Chun accepted his pair with a nod, noting how her latex gloves seemed too large for her hands. Most medical personnel he'd worked with were meticulous about proper equipment fit. It was a small detail, but in his line of work, small details often meant the difference between mission success and body bags. The plane lurched violently to port as they hit another pocket of turbulence. Elena stumbled, her medical bag sliding across the metal floor. She reached out instinctively to steady herself, her gloved hand grasping Chun's tactical vest just above his ceramic plate. Carrier. That's when it happened. The latex caught on the Velcro strip of his radio pouch and tore, with a sharp ripping sound that somehow cut through the engine noise. Elena's bare wrist was exposed for perhaps 3 seconds, long enough for Chun to see the intricate tattoo that decorated her olive skin. 2 serpentine fangs, curved and deadly, intertwined in a pattern that formed the unmistakable head of a Hydra. The ink was deep black with subtle red highlights that seemed to pulse in the dim cabin lighting. But it wasn't just any tattoo. Chun recognized the specific design, the precise angle of the fangs, the way the scales seemed to shimmer with an almost 3-dimensional quality dot. It was the mark of the Crimson Hydra. Chun's blood turned to ice water in his veins. 2 years ago, his younger brother Danny had been part of a Marine reconnaissance unit that stumbled upon a Hydra training camp in the mountains of Pakistan. The terrorists had captured the entire squad, and for 3 weeks, the world watched in horror as they were tortured and executed one by one in high-definition videos posted online. Danny had been the last to die, and the Hydra operative who slit his throat had worn that exact same tattoo on his wrist. Alana's eyes met his in that frozen moment, and Chun saw something flicker across her features: recognition, calculation, and what might have been fear. She quickly yanked her sleeve down and pulled on a fresh pair of gloves from her bag. But the damage was done. "Sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the tension that now crackled between them like electricity. "Turbulence." Chun nodded slowly, his hand moving almost imperceptibly toward the Sig Sauer P226 holstered at his thigh. "No problem, Doc." But his mind was racing. How had a Crimson Hydra operative infiltrated their mission? The security clearance required for this operation was beyond top secret. Background checks that went back 3 generations. Psychological evaluations, polygraph tests that could detect lies about what you had for breakfast. Either the terrorist organization had resources and reach far beyond what intelligence agencies believed, or Elena Vasquez wasn't who she claimed to be. The other SEALs had noticed the sudden shift in atmosphere. Team leader Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez glanced between Chun and Elena with the practiced eye of a man who'd learned to read danger in the micro-expressions of his operators. Across the cabin, Petty Officer Williams had stopped cleaning his rifle and was watching the exchange with predatory focus. Elena continued her distribution of earplugs, but Chum could see the change in her movement patterns. Where before she'd been relaxed and professional, now every gesture was controlled, calculated. She was positioning herself with clear sight lines to the exits, keeping her medical bag within easy reach. Her breathing had shifted from the deep, steady rhythm of someone focused on routine tasks to the shallow, controlled pattern of someone preparing for violence. "Dr. Vasquez," Rodriguez called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Run through the facility layout one more time. I want to make sure everyone's clear on the entry points." Elena nodded and moved to the center of the cabin, pulling out a tablet that displayed architectural blueprints. "The target is a 3-story concrete structure built into the coastal cliff face," she began, her voice betraying nothing of the tension Chun could see in her shoulders. "Primary entry will be through the service dock on the lower level. Secondary extraction point is the helicopter pad on the roof." As she spoke, Chun studied her with new eyes. The way she held herself, the unconscious tactical awareness, the fact that she seemed to know the building's layout better than someone who'd only studied satellite photos should. When she mentioned a blind spot in the Eastern Corridor surveillance coverage, Chun's suspicions crystallized into certainty. That blind spot wasn't on any of their intelligence reports. It wasn't something you could determine from external reconnaissance. It was insider knowledge, the kind of detail only someone who'd been inside the facility would know. Elena Vasquez had been in that building before. The question was whether she'd been there as a prisoner, an infiltrator, or something far worse. The plane shuddered again as they began their descent toward the drop zone. Through the porthole, Chun could see the dark waters of the Mediterranean stretching endlessly below them. In 15 minutes, they would be parachuting into hostile territory with a woman who bore the mark of the organization that had murdered his brother. Elena finished her briefing and began packing up her equipment. As she bent to retrieve her medical bag, Chun caught another glimpse of her wrist where the sleeve had ridden up slightly. The Hydra tattoo seemed to writhe in the shifting light, its fanged heads pointing toward her palm like arrows indicating a target. "Excuse me," Elena said suddenly, her voice cutting through Chun's dark thoughts. "I need to check my equipment one more time before we jump." She moved toward the rear of the cargo bay, her medical bag clutched tightly in her hands. Chun watched her go, every instinct screaming that he was about to let a viper slip away into the shadows. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Chun waited exactly 30 seconds before following Elena toward the rear of the aircraft. The cargo bay stretched back into shadows where equipment pallets and parachute gear created a maze of potential hiding spots. The sound of the engines was louder here, providing cover for conversation or confrontation. He found her crouched beside a stack of supply crates, her medical bag open on the floor. In the dim red lighting, he could see her hands moving with practiced efficiency through what appeared to be standard field medical supplies. But Chun's trained eye caught details that didn't add up. The way she handled a particular sealed package with unusual care. How her fingers lingered on items that looked more like electronic components than bandages. Interesting tattoo, Chun said quietly, positioning himself between Elena and the main cabin. Elena's hands stilled for a fraction of a second before continuing their work. I'm sorry? The Hydra. On your wrist. Chun's voice carried the flat, emotionless tone he used when interrogating prisoners. Crimson Hydra, to be specific. I've seen that exact design before. She looked up at him then, and Chun saw something shift behind her dark eyes. The professional mask slipped just enough to reveal the calculating predator beneath. I think you're mistaken, Petty Officer Chun. The fact that she knew his name when he hadn't introduced himself sent another chill down his spine. Am I? Because 2 years ago, I watched a man with that same tattoo cut my brother's throat on a live video feed. Elena slowly closed her medical bag and stood, her movements fluid and controlled. She was smaller than Chun by at least 6 inches and 50 pounds. But something in her posture suggested she didn't consider that a disadvantage. Your brother was Daniel Chun, Marine Lance Corporal, attached to the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, she said softly. Captured during Operation Silent Thunder in the Khyber Pass, held for 23 days before execution. Chun's hand moved to his sidearm. How the hell do you know that? Because I was there. The words hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Elena's eyes never left his face as she continued. I watched them kill your brother, Marcus. I watched them kill all of them. And there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. Bullshit. Chun's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the promise of violence. You're one of them. You're Crimson Hydra. Elena's laugh was bitter and sharp. You think I chose this? She pulled up her sleeve, revealing not just the Hydra tattoo, but a network of scars that crisscrossed her forearm like a roadmap of pain. You think I asked to spend 3 years in hell, earning the trust of the animals who murdered your brother? Chun's grip on his weapon tightened, but doubt crept into his certainty. The scars were old, layered, the kind that came from prolonged, systematic torture. Prove it. The facility we're hitting tonight, Elena said, her voice dropping to barely audible over the engine noise. It's not a weapons depot. It's a command center. The man who killed your brother, Halil Arashed, he's inside that building right now, planning something that will make 9/11s look like a warm-up act. Chun felt the world tilt around him. You're lying. The service tunnel I mentioned in the briefing? It leads directly to Al-Rashid's private quarters. The medical supplies in my bag? Enough C4 to turn that entire section of the building into rubble. Elena's eyes burned with an intensity that made Chun step back involuntarily. I've been planning this for 2 years, Marcus. Every day since I watched your brother die. Before Chun could respond, the aircraft's alarm system erupted in a cacophony of warning tones. Red lights bathed the cargo bay as the plane banked sharply to starboard, throwing both of them against the equipment pallets. What the hell? Chun started, but Elena was already moving. Her medical bag clutched against her chest as she fought to maintain balance. We're taking fire, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with unnatural calm. Someone leaked our flight path. The implications hit Chun like a physical blow. If Elena was telling the truth about being undercover, then someone else had compromised the mission. If she was lying, then she just revealed that the Crimson Hydra knew they were coming. Either way, they were flying into a trap. The plane shuddered as something exploded nearby, close enough to rattle the hull but not close enough to bring them down. Yet, Rodriguez. Chun shouted toward the main cabin. We've got a problem. The team leader appeared at the edge of the equipment area, his face grim in the red emergency lighting. Surface-to-air missiles. At least 3 launch sites. Pilots trying to evade, but we're sitting ducks up here. Elena pushed past Chun, her earlier tension replaced by focused urgency. How long until we reach the drop zone? 8 minutes, if we make it that long, Rodriguez replied. Why? Because if we go down over water, everything I've worked for dies with us. Elena's voice carried an authority that made both SEALs listen despite their suspicions. Al-Rashid has a nuclear device. Not a dirty bomb, an actual warhead, stolen from a Pakistani transport convoy 6 months ago. He's planning to detonate it in the port of Haifa during the peace summit next week. Chun felt his blood turn to ice. The peace summit would bring together the leaders of 12 nations, including the President of the United States. A nuclear detonation would kill hundreds of thousands and trigger a war that could consume the entire Middle East. How do you know this? Rodriguez demanded. Because I helped him plan it, Elena said simply. It was the only way to get close enough to stop him. Another explosion, closer this time. The plane's frame groaned under the stress as the pilot threw them into an evasive spiral that made Chun's stomach lurch. Sir, came a voice from the cockpit over the intercom. We've lost hydraulics on the port side. I can keep us airborne for maybe 5 more minutes. Elena grabbed Chen's arm, her fingers digging into his tactical vest. Listen to me very carefully. When we hit the ground, Al-Rashid's people will be waiting. They think I'm delivering you to them. 12 of America's best operators, captured alive for a propaganda execution that will be broadcast worldwide. And you're telling us this why? Rodriguez asked, his weapon now drawn and pointed at Elena's center mass. Because I need you to trust me long enough to let me get you inside that facility. Elena's eyes moved between the two men, and Chun saw something in them he hadn't expected. Desperation. I can get you to Al-Rashid. I can get you to the bomb. But only if you let me play my role until the moment is right. The plane lurched violently as another missile detonated nearby. Through the small porthole, Chun could see the dark coastline rushing up to meet them, dotted with the muzzle flashes of anti-aircraft guns. How do we know you won't just hand us over? Chun asked. Elena reached into her medical bag and pulled out what looked like a standard field dressing. But when she peeled back the outer layer, Chun could see the unmistakable shape of a detonator underneath. Because, she said, pressing the device into his hands, if I betray you, I want you to kill me first. The plane's engines screamed as they began their final descent toward a landing that none of them might survive. The C-130 hit the ground like a meteor, its landing gear shearing off on impact as the massive aircraft skidded across the rocky terrain in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Chun felt his world turn into a kaleidoscope of violence, equipment flying through the air, the screech of rending aluminum, and the acrid smell of burning fuel filling his nostrils. When the plane finally ground to a halt against a cluster of boulders, an eerie silence fell over the wreckage. Chun found himself pinned beneath a supply pallet, his ears ringing from the impact. Blood trickled down his forehead from a gash above his left eye, but he was alive. Sound off. Rodriguez's voice cut through the darkness, hoarse but commanding. One by one, the SEALs reported in. Miraculously, all 12 operators had survived the crash, though Williams had a dislocated shoulder and Martinez was nursing what looked like broken ribs. But it was Elena's voice that surprised Chun the most. I'm mobile, she called out from somewhere near the rear of the wreckage. Medical supplies are intact. Chun pushed the pallet off his legs and struggled to his feet. The detonator Elena had given him still clutched in his right hand. Through a gaping hole in the fuselage, he could see the Syrian coastline stretching out before them, a desolate landscape of rocky hills and sparse vegetation painted silver by the moonlight. Movement? 2 o'clock, whispered Petty Officer Jackson from his position near the cockpit. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast. Chun counted at least 6 sets of headlights winding their way up the coastal road toward the crash site. They had maybe 3 minutes before the Crimson Hydra forces reached them. Elena appeared beside him, her medical bag slung across her shoulder and her face streaked with dirt and blood. "This is it," she said quietly. "They're coming to collect their prize." "How do we know you won't just hand us over?" Rodriguez demanded, echoing Chun's earlier question as he checked his rifle. Elena pulled out a small device that looked like a modified cell phone. "Because I've been transmitting our location to a CIA extraction team for the past hour. If I was really working for Al-Rashid, why would I call in backup?" Chun studied her face in the dim light filtering through the wreckage. The professional mask was completely gone now, replaced by something raw and desperate. "Show me the transmission log." Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for Chun to notice, then handed him the device. The screen showed a series of encrypted messages sent to what appeared to be a CIA communication hub. But something about the timestamps bothered him. "These messages," Chun said slowly, "they're all from before we took off." "Pre-programmed," Elena admitted. "I couldn't risk transmitting during the flight. Al-Rashid has people monitoring all CIA frequencies." It was plausible, but Chun's instincts were screaming that something was still wrong. Before he could voice his concerns, the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. "Weapons down," Elena ordered, her voice carrying an authority that made several of the SEALs hesitate. "If they see you armed, they'll kill you on sight. You need to look like prisoners." "Like hell," Rodriguez growled. "Chief," Elena said, her voice urgent, "I know this is asking everything of you, but I've spent 3 years building this cover. 3 years earning Al-Rashid's trust. If you blow it now, that nuclear device goes off in Haifa and hundreds of thousands of people die." The vehicles were close enough now that Chun could hear individual engines. At least 20 men, probably more. Even for a SEAL team, those weren't good odds in open terrain with limited cover. "What's the play?" Rodriguez asked finally. Elena's response was interrupted by the sharp crack of rifle fire. Bullets sparked off the aircraft's hull as spotlights blazed to life, turning the crash site into a harsh tableau of light and shadow. "Nobody move," came a voice in accented English. "American soldiers, you are surrounded." Elena stepped forward, her hands raised but her posture confident. "Halil," she called out in Arabic. "It's Layla, I have them." Chun felt his blood freeze. Layla. He'd heard that name in the intelligence briefings about Crimson Hydra operations. Layla al-Sara, the mysterious female operative who'd been responsible for at least a dozen successful attacks against Western targets. If Elena was Layla, a figure emerged from behind one of the vehicles. A tall man with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes like chips of obsidian. Even in the harsh glare of the spotlights, Chun could see the Hydra tattoo on the man's neck. This had to be Al-Rashid himself. "My dear Layla," Al-Rashid said in English, his voice carrying the cultured accent of someone educated in Western universities. "You have exceeded even my expectations." Elena, or Layla, walked toward him with the confident stride of someone returning home after a successful hunt. 12 of their best operators delivered as promised. The Americans never suspected. Chun watched in horror as Al-Rashid embraced Elena like a long-lost daughter. Either she was the most dedicated undercover operative in CIA history, or she just revealed herself as one of the most wanted terrorists on the planet. "Secure them," Al-Rashid ordered his men. "But carefully. We want them alive for the broadcast." As Crimson Hydra operatives moved in with zip-tie restraints, Elena caught Chun's eye. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and he saw something that made his breath catch, a look of such profound anguish that it cut through all his suspicions like a blade. She mouthed a single word: "Trust." Then the moment was gone, and she was back in character, directing the terrorists as they bound the SEALs' hands behind their backs. Chun felt the plastic restraints bite into his wrists, but he kept the detonator hidden in his palm. The devices weighed a small comfort against the growing certainty that they were all about to die. "The facility is prepared?" Elena asked Al-Rashid as they loaded the prisoners into the back of a military truck. "Everything is ready, my dear. The device is armed and positioned. Tomorrow, when the world watches these American dogs die, they will understand that the age of Western dominance is over." As the convoy began moving toward the coastal facility, Chun found himself pressed against Williams in the cramped truck bed. The other SEAL's eyes were wide with barely controlled panic. "She's one of them," Williams whispered. "We're dead." But Chun was thinking about that look Elena had given him, the anguish, the desperation, the plea for trust. He thought about the scars on her arms, the way she'd known details about his brother's death, the detonator she'd pressed into his hands. "Maybe," Chun whispered back. "Or maybe she's the only reason we're still breathing." Through the truck's canvas cover, he could see the dark bulk of the facility rising from the coastal cliffs like a concrete cancer. Somewhere inside that building was a nuclear weapon capable of killing hundreds of thousands. And their only hope of stopping it was a woman who might be the most dangerous terrorist alive, or the most dedicated hero he'd ever met. In less than an hour, Chun knew he'd find out which. The detonator felt warm in his palm as the truck carried them toward whatever fate awaited in the darkness ahead. The facility loomed against the night sky like a fortress carved from the living rock of the Syrian coast. Floodlights swept the perimeter in methodical patterns, and Chun could see armed guards positioned at regular intervals along the concrete walls. As their convoy approached the main gate, he caught glimpses of sophisticated surveillance, equipment in what looked like automated defense systems. This wasn't just a terrorist hideout. It was a military installation. The truck lurched to a stop in a courtyard, surrounded by 3-story concrete walls. Chun counted at least 40 Crimson Hydra operatives, all armed with military-grade weapons and moving with the discipline of trained soldiers rather than fanatical terrorists. Whatever Al-Rashid was planning, he had the resources of a small army at his disposal. "Out," commanded one of the guards in heavily accented English. The SEALs were hauled from the truck bed and forced to their knees on the cold concrete. Chun kept the detonator hidden in his palm, the device's metal surface slick with sweat. Elena or Lila, he still wasn't sure which was real, stood beside Al-Rashid as he surveyed his prisoners like a general inspecting captured enemy soldiers. In the harsh glare of the floodlights, Chun could see that her face had taken on an expression of cold satisfaction that made his stomach turn. "Magnificent," Al-Rashid murmured. "The elite of the American military, delivered into our hands like lambs to slaughter." He walked slowly down the line of kneeling SEALs, studying each face with the detached interest of a scientist examining specimens. When he reached Chun, he paused. "This one," Al-Rashid said to Elena. "He looks familiar." Elena's eyes met Chun's for a fraction of a second, and he saw something flicker in their depths, warning, perhaps, or preparation. "His name is Marcus Chun. His brother was one of the Marines we executed 2 years ago." Al-Rashid's face lit up with genuine delight. "Ah, yes. The reconnaissance unit. Your brother died very bravely, Mr. Chun. He lasted almost an hour under interrogation before he broke." Chun felt rage surge through him like molten metal, but he forced himself to remain still. Whatever game Elena was playing, he couldn't afford to break character now. "Bring them inside," Al-Rashid ordered. "The broadcast equipment is ready in the main hall. The world will watch these American heroes die at dawn, just as the peace summit begins in Haifa." As they were marched through the facility's corridors, Chun tried to memorize the layout. The building was larger than their intelligence had suggested, with multiple levels carved deep into the coastal cliff. They passed laboratories filled with sophisticated equipment, armories stocked with enough weapons to outfit a battalion, and communication centers that rivaled anything he'd seen at CENTCOM. Elena walked beside Al-Rashid, discussing technical details about the upcoming broadcast with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this before. But Chun noticed small things, how she positioned herself to block certain security cameras, the way she subtly guided their route past what looked like structural weak points, the coded phrases she used that seemed to carry double meanings. "The device is secure?" she asked as they descended a staircase toward the lower levels. "Completely. Dr. Nazir has confirmed that the yield will be sufficient to level 6 city blocks. The radiation will make the port unusable for decades." Al-Rashid's voice carried the satisfaction of a man who believed he was about to change the world. They entered a vast underground chamber that had been converted into a television studio. Professional cameras were positioned around a raised platform where 12 chairs had been arranged in a neat row. Behind them, a massive banner displayed the Crimson Hydra symbol alongside Arabic text that Chun didn't need translated. "Impressive, is it not?" Al-Rashid said, gesturing toward the setup. "When the leaders of 12 nations watch their American protectors die on live television, they will understand the new order is rising." Elena nodded approvingly, but Chun caught her glancing toward a service door marked with radiation warning symbols. That had to be where they were keeping the nuclear device. "Secure them to the chairs," Al-Rashid ordered his men. "I want to test the camera angles before we begin." As the terrorists moved to comply, Elena stepped forward. "Halil, there's something we need to discuss privately." "About the timing?" Al-Rashid raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "The CIA extraction team I mentioned in my reports. They're closer than we anticipated. We may need to accelerate the schedule." Chun felt his blood turn to ice. If Elena really had called in CIA backup, she just revealed their position to Al-Rashid. But if she was still playing her role, how close? Al-Rashid demanded. 6 hours, maybe less. But if we broadcast the executions now, while it's still dark, the psychological impact will be even greater. The world will wake up to the news that America's best are dead. Al-Rashid considered this, his eyes calculating. "Yes, you're right. The element of surprise will serve us well." He turned to his men. "Begin the broadcast immediately. I want those cameras rolling in 10 minutes. As the terrorists rushed to prepare their equipment, Elena moved closer to the bound seals. Under the pretense of checking their restraints, she whispered urgently to Chun, "The device is through that door. Basement level, heavy security. When I give the signal, you'll have maybe 30 seconds. "What signal?" Chun whispered back. "You'll know it when you see it." Before Chun could ask more questions, Al-Rashid called Elena back to his side. "Layla, I want you to deliver the opening statement. Your voice will carry more weight with Western audiences." Elena nodded and moved toward the cameras. As the red recording lights began to blink, she looked directly into the lens with an expression of cold determination. "People of the world," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Today marks the end of American hegemony and the beginning of a new age of justice." Chun watched in growing horror as Elena delivered a speech that could have been written by Al-Rashid himself. She spoke of Western oppression, of the need for violent resistance, of the symbolic importance of executing America's elite soldiers on live television. But then, as she reached the climax of her speech, something changed. Her hand moved to her collar, and Chun saw her fingers close around something small and metallic. "The age of the Hydra has begun," Elena declared. "And like the mythical beast, we cannot be killed by cutting off one head." She pulled the object from her collar, a small device that looked like a modified radio transmitter. "But unlike the Hydra legend," she continued, her voice taking on a different tone. "We can be destroyed from within." Al-Rashid's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "Layla, what are you?" Elena pressed the transmitter's activation button. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the facility as emergency lights bathed everything in pulsing red. The earplugs she distributed on the plane, they hadn't been earplugs at all. They'd been micro-explosives, designed to detonate simultaneously and cripple the facility's power grid. In the chaos that followed, as terrorists ran for emergency positions and the lights flickered between darkness and emergency illumination, Elena drew a concealed pistol and put 2 rounds center mass into Al-Rashid before anyone could react. "Now!" She screamed to Chun as she dove for cover behind the camera equipment. Chun bit down hard on the detonator's activation switch, feeling the device crack between his teeth. The plastic restraints around his wrists had been weakened by a small blade Elena had palmed during her inspection. They snapped. As he surged to his feet, the facility shook as secondary explosions began rippling through the upper levels. Elana's 3-year infiltration had been preparation for this moment. She planted charges throughout the building, turning Al-Rashid's fortress into a death trap. But as Chun fought his way toward the radiation-marked door, he realized the most dangerous part of their mission was just beginning. Somewhere in the basement of this collapsing facility was a nuclear weapon, and they had minutes to find it before Elena's explosives brought the entire cliff face down on top of them. The real battle was about to begin.